This is Heinrich from the Geeks, Gadgets, and Guns podcast. You're listening to one of the shows on the Self-Defense Radio Network. You can find all the other shows at selfdefenseradio.net.
Welcome to Unload and Show Clear, the podcast about all things IDPA. And now, here's your host, the only man to shoot the same non-threat 4 times at Nationals, Lloyd Bailey.
Welcome to another episode of Unload and Show Clear. This is a podcast about the men and women who compete in IDPA, International Defensive Pistol Association. Now, I've been attending IDPA matches since 2011, and over the years, I've met some really amazing people thanks to this sport. Ignore all the colorful jerseys and the sponsor logos, and underneath you're going to find everyday men and women who volunteer their time and their effort and spend their hard-earned dollars on travel, match fees, and gear to make this sport great. And today you're going to meet another one of these awesome people. But first, I want to thank today's sponsor. Before we get started, let me tell you about GlockTriggers.com. Love them or hate them, the one thing you know about Glock pistols is that they are reliable. Out of the box, to the range, absolutely reliable. It's what makes them so popular with competitors, law enforcement, military, and responsible armed citizens. But one of the drawbacks is that stock trigger. Well, Jeff Wilson and the folks at Glock Triggers asked themselves, how do we make them better while maintaining reliability? Using stock parts as their foundation, they've refined the interaction of the metal parts to give you smoother take-up, a cleaner break, and reduced overtravel without sacrificing safety or reliability. Recommended and used by people like Bob Vogel, Travis Haley, and Ken Hackathorn, Glock Triggers custom trigger kits come with a lifetime warranty and a 30-day satisfaction guarantee. Visit them today at GlockTriggers.com and check out the Edge, the Vogel, the Skimmer, the Guardian, and the Hackathorn trigger systems. Use the promo code from this podcast, USC20, and save 20% off of your entire order. GlockTriggers.com. The highest quality drop-in trigger system for your Glock. Our special guest today is Angela Swenson from Greenbrier, Arkansas. Angela, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So tell us a little about yourself and what you do for a living there in Greenbrier.
Like you said, I live in Greenbrier, Arkansas, and that's about 30 miles north of Little Rock. I'm from North Little Rock, and I moved to the Greenbrier area to go to college. And met my husband on the first day of school, and so I've stayed there ever since. And we've been together for about 22 years now. And I work for Iberia Bank. I'm the trust operations manager, and I've been at this job for 17 years now.
Where does the interest in guns come from? Did you grow up around them? Were you introduced to them as a kid? Was it something that your husband introduced you to? Where did the interest in guns develop?
Well, I guess I could say that I didn't really grow up around them, but they were always in the house as a kid. My dad has always been a hunter. He worked for Remington Arms for 42 years. He retired a few years back. And he was a big hunter growing up, and he was a trap shooter. He would shoot in trap competitions. And I did the normal, he would take me out to, at my grandma's farm, we'd go out to like a creek and shoot Coke cans in the creek and that sort of thing with the .22 pistol. But other than that, done a few times, I really didn't shoot. I didn't really go hunting with them. I haven't been involved in hunting. I still don't hunt. So how I got involved was in 2007. My dad called me one day and he said, "Hey, the range that I shoot at is having a ladies' day. Do you want to come?" So I was like, "Sure." He was like, you just show up, pay $10, and there'll be all kinds of guns there and people to show you how to shoot them. So I was like, okay. Well, at the time I was out of college, but I was almost 30 at the time. And, just being away from guns from the time I was about 15 till then, I had almost become scared of them just because I hadn't been around one. I hadn't shot one in that many years.
Right.
And, of course, being an adult and you watch the news and they portray guns in such a bad way. And the only thing you hear about them are the shootings that you see on the news and that sort of thing. And so I thought, sure, why not? I would like to learn how to shoot one. So I show up for this ladies' day. It was at the Casa Range in right outside of Little Rock in Perryville, which you've been to many times.
Mm-hmm.
And I show up, and there's all these people there, just volunteers basically, and then my dad was a volunteer, and then just other, probably just members of the range at the time were there, and they just brought their personal guns and said, "Here, show me what you want to shoot." And so you just basically stood at this table full of pistols and pointed to whatever gun you wanted to shoot, and then they made some recommendations. Here, try this. They told us what it was. They showed us how to load it, unload it, put the safety on and off, and shoot. And so as a lot of ladies realize that sometimes it's not real good for somebody's husband or dad to be the person to teach them how to shoot, because there's that tension there.
Mm-hmm.
And so just having other people other than my dad, I mean, he was a good instructor too, but just having other people's point of view and telling you, how to stand, how to hold the gun, how to aim, that sort of thing. It was just interesting to hear the different perspectives. And so anyway, they would write down on a sheet of paper like what guns that you shot, so you could take it with you and decide which ones that you like if you wanted to purchase one. And so I think they had only planned for that event to last a few hours, and by the time I left there, I had been there for 7 hours, and I shot everything from a .22 pistol to a .50 caliber rifle. I shot machine guns that day.
Oh, wow.
I shot shotguns. I mean, I felt like Rambo. I mean, I had the little MAC-10, and I mean, I shot everything that you could think of that day. And so my adrenaline was going crazy. And of course, the next day I couldn't even lift my arms because my shoulders were so sore just from shooting that much. But I was hooked. And so that's how I became interested in it. And so later, let's see, that was like April of 2007. And so then a couple of months later, my dad was like, well, do you want to go out to, just the game and fish range and, shoot a little bit? And so we did. And my dad's a big 1911 fan. And so he basically had one gun that he would, like one pistol. He carried it. He shot it in IDPA matches. That was basically the only gun he had, the only pistol. Mm-hmm. And so it was a .45 caliber. And so I shot it. I had shot some, at that ladies' day, but I thought, well, I shot his gun and I loved it. And then I thought, well, maybe I should go to one of these matches that he's been telling me about. So about a month after that, I went to a steel challenge match because I thought, well, I really don't want to be moving and running and try to shoot around barriers and that sort of thing. So I'm just going to try a steel challenge where all you have to do is stand still and, kind of
ease your way into the competition, right?
Yeah. So it was a lot less intimidating. And so I went to a steel challenge, shot it with the .22, loved it. It was fun. And then the next month, my dad was like, well, why don't you come to IDPA with me? So I thought, well, I'll just come watch. That's what everybody says. And so I went out to the Benton Gun Club, which is also right outside of Little Rock. And I was just going to watch, like I said, but he was like, well, you can use my gun. We can just share the gun. And of course, people there are like, no, you can't watch. You need to shoot. And so people are like, here, I've got a 1911 holster, an extra one, and here I've got mag pouches. And so before I knew it, I had all the gear on except the gun. And then whenever it was my turn to shoot, my dad and I would walk up to the starting position. And when the safety officer said, load and make ready, I would grab the gun out of my dad's holster and load and put it in my holster. And I would shoot the stage. And then once I unload and show clear, he would walk up there and I would stick it in his holster so then he could shoot. So it wasn't really the ideal way to shoot your first match, but but it worked out and it got me hooked. And so that was in August of 2007. And then in December of 2007, I turned 30 and I bought my first gun for my 30th birthday. And I had planned to buy a 1911 and a 9mm, but at the time there was basically a shortage of them. I mean, every brand that you could think of, they were out of stock. I guess, I don't know if IDPA was really vamping up then and the cost of ammo was so high, everybody was going down to 9mm or what. But so anyway, I thought, well, I can't find a 9mm anywhere. I'll just buy a 45 because that's what I've been shooting of my dad's anyway. So I might as well just get a 45. So I did, and so I shot that for a couple years. I went ahead and joined IDPA, and that's pretty much how it started. It just snowballed from then. And I've been listening to some of these other podcasts, and I'm like, man, I've been shooting for a really long time. And the intro to one of your podcasts that said something like Boyd Bailey, how perfect example.
How little you can accomplish.
Yes, how little you can accomplish with no practice. I thought, that is me. That is me. I've been doing this for a really long time, and I haven't really gone very far. But
how long after that first match where you were swapping the gun back and forth with your dad, how long after that before you felt like you were ready to try a sanctioned match?
It was the following summer that I think that was the first sanctioned match around that area that came about since I had started shooting. And it was, so it would have been June of 2008. And it was the first annual. It was actually the only annual because it was the only one. But it was called the first annual Armed Forces IDPA match. And it was held at CASA, and Mike Plato was the match director. And I just remember, I don't remember a whole lot about the match other than when I showed up that day, of course I was so nervous, but the Italians, for the IDPA Italians, were there. And I thought, what in the world? Why would they come all the way from Italy to Arkansas to shoot a sanctioned match? But they were so much fun. And I remember after the match, they hung out. I mean, we probably stayed for a few hours after the match just hanging out, and they were just a blast to be around. And so I was like, boy, these people are just, they must really love this sport, and they're just awesome people. And so I actually made High Lady that match, and I did not come in last in my class. I was CDP Marksman, and I did not come in last, which was my goal for my first sanction match, to not be DQ'd and to not come in last. And so, and then I got High Lady on top of that. So I thought, well, maybe I can do this and get good at this. So my plan was to, really practice and get good. So that plan hasn't panned out yet, but I have gotten better since then. I just haven't moved up very much.
Do you have a memory from a particular sanctioned match, one where you just had a lot of fun, or it was a particularly challenging match, or just crazy things happened, something over the course? Because you've been at this for 10 years now, plus 10 plus. Do you have any stories or memories you can share?
Oh, yeah. I've got lots of memories of those crazy stages like at Nationals that year. That was the year that we were shooting out of the little red Dodge Neon, and I'm like, I'm going to shoot out of a car. I'm doing a drive-by. Like, Wow. I shot off of a motorcycle. One of the stages, we were sitting on a motorcycle, and we had this backpack with like sandbags or something in it. And I don't know if it was, I just was a newbie shooter and didn't, how everybody, they tell you the scenario, and then you get to do like your little individual, you sit there and, get your plan together. I don't know if I just didn't sit on this motorcycle first or what, and feel this this backpack. But when it was my turn to shoot, I got up there, I put the backpack on, and the targets were on both sides of the motorcycle. And so the buzzer went off, and I shot the targets on the left of me, and then I swung over really fast, and that backpack was so heavy, it almost like swung me off of the motorcycle. I was like, I caught myself, but I was like, whoa, I was not expecting that. And
well, you're not tall either.
Right,
so
right. And at the time, I was a lot smaller than I am now. So anyway, plus shooting the 45, people were looking at me like, oh, this little girl is shooting a 45. And I was laughing, listening to Kitty Richards. That was the year I met her too. But I was listening to her podcast too, and I was laughing because she shot a 45, and we're about the same height. So, but anyway, but another funny scenario, I guess, was down at Hot Springs. They used to have this match called Shoot, Rattle, and Roll. I think it's what they called it. Shoot, Rattle, and Roll. And I can't remember if it was actually an IDPA sanctioned match, but it was at least IDP. I think it might have been, but if it wasn't, it was at least IDPA-like. And they had just some crazy scenarios down there. And one of them in particular that I remember was you were sitting in a car, and they had this cable hooked to the front of the car, and it went up all the way like downrange and around some little contraption, and it was hooked to a tractor. And so when the buzzer went off, the guy driving the tractor started, and he started driving uprange, and it was pulling the car downrange, and you had to shoot targets out both sides of the car windows as you're driving by. And I still have video of that. I actually watched that video not too long ago, and I was like, wow, the tractor was going kind of fast, and of course it's a jerky start. And anyway, it's just, it gets your adrenaline going, and it was just really fun stages.
That's pretty neat. Let's play a little Pick Your Poison. I don't know whether you've heard this segment yet, but I'm going to throw some either-or questions at you and let you kind of give us an idea of which of the two you prefer.
Okay.
Now you're a sharpshooter in ESP. You also shoot CDP.
Right.
I'm not going to ask you the Glock versus 1911 question, but if you had to choose ESP or CDP and you could only shoot one, which would you choose?
Oh man, that's tough. Oh, that's a tough one, because the thing with the CDP is so the story was I shot that for a few years, and then I kept having all these guys at the range like, hey, you should really try 9mm. And I'm like, well, I tried finding one, and they didn't have any. And then I said, I like shooting the 45. And they're like, oh, but you could shoot so much faster if you would just shoot the 9mm, and you just do really good. And so then I thought, well, if you're telling me that, then that just makes me want to practice with the 45 and get really good with the 45 and beat you when you're shooting the 9. And so I just stuck with it. I was stubborn and hard-headed. And then one day, Myron Young, he said, listen here, you hard-headed idiot. If I bring you my 1911 9mm and ammo and mags, will you just shoot it at a club match for one match? And I was like, okay, sure. So he brings me...
Twist my arm.
Yeah. So he brings me an STI 9mm. And because in my head... Well, and back up for a second. So I went to the 2009 and 10 nationals both years, and actually, like a week before I left to go to the 2010 nationals, I found out I was pregnant. And so I went ahead and shot the nationals, and then I thought, okay, now I'm going to take, because, I had already planned to go, so I wasn't going to back out. But because of the, there's controversy, is it safe or is it not, shooting while pregnant. Right. So I was like, well, I'm not going to take any chances. And so I just decided after that nationals, I would take off. So I took off the rest of my pregnancy and had planned to go back right after my daughter was born. But of course, you know how that goes. And then I've got a baby at home, and I thought, well, so I shot a few times within the first 2 years of her life, but not much. So whenever I went back with the 45, I was really out of practice. I wasn't horrible, but I wasn't any better, obviously, than I was, 2 years before that. And so, in my defense, I had a couple of years off. And
well, it's a perishable skill, yes, they say. So if you take 2 years off or a year off, it's gonna take you a little bit of time to get it back.
Exactly. And so, a few months after I had come back, or I guess it was probably about a year after I come back, that's when Myron was like, look, I'm going to bring you this gun. You just shoot it for one match and tell me what you think. So I was like, okay, fine. So because in my head, I thought I'm going to be so much faster because all these guys tell me I'm going to be so much faster with the 9mm because it's not going to kick. And, I could just double tap everything. And so in my head, I was just going to just blow through it. Well, that's exactly what I did, because they were like, oh, it'll feel like a BB gun. Well, he probably had downloaded ammo that he gave me. And, not illegal, just downloaded, And so that first shot of that match, I actually stopped and looked at I kind of turned my head and looked at the gun to make sure that it was working properly, because I thought that just didn't feel right. And then when I realized, oh, it's just because it's a 9mm and there wasn't much recoil, I thought, okay, go. And so then I just double tapped everything. I shot so fast. I kicked everybody's tail at that match when the scores came out. I was like, holy crap. That was amazing. And so, of course, I thought, no, it's just his gun. I can't do that. Can't do that with my gun. And so, but at that day, I decided I'm getting one of these guns. I asked him if I could buy that one, and of course he said no. And so
of course.
the next time I got a bonus at work, I spent all of it at Dawson Precision. So I bought me an STI 9mm, the little competition ready package, and bought 5 mags to go with it. And I started shooting ESP. And about that time, I started shooting quite a bit again. My daughter was about 3 by then, and so, I thought, well, I can leave her at home with my husband. He used to shoot with me a little bit before she was born, and then after she was born, I'm like, well, now who's going to watch the kid, And he's like, well, that's your and your dad thing. So, he liked it, but, probably not as much as I do. So he's like, I'll watch her, you go shoot with your dad. And, so I started shooting a little more, not as much as I was before I had Anna, but after I went back, it was, I'd shoot probably twice a month or so, and I started improving. And I thought, yeah, this is fun. I'm going to do this. And so anyway, right about the time I finally got up to the top quarter of the ESP Marksman class, I was like, yeah, I'm going to start winning trophies. I'm going to start bringing home some wood. And then all of a sudden, I went to Battle in Benton. I think it was the same match you were talking about on one of your other podcasts. That first match that you came to, was that your first match in Arkansas or something?
Yep, it was.
Yeah. And so that might have been, I guess that's where I met you, maybe.
Yep.
And so, but anyway, at that match, of course, I was a safety officer at that match, and I just shot really good that day. I don't know what it was, but I had a really good day. the same day that a lot of other people had a really bad day. And so I got lucky, I guess, or well, I was thinking unlucky at the time because I'm like, are you kidding me? I ended up coming in first in ESP Marksman, and I got a bump to Sharpshooter. And I'm like, I just got to the top quarter of Marksman, and now I'm getting bumped to Sharpshooter. So now I'm going to be in the bottom half and get my butt kicked every time. So I was kind of complaining to my dad. And I was excited about winning, but I thought I got one plaque, and I was like, that's the end of that. And so my dad, he said the old saying, would you rather be the best of the worst or the worst of the best? And so I thought, well, okay, if you put it that way. So I guess I'll just have to start practicing. Then again, I told myself I would practice, but did I? No. So I'm still an ESP sharpshooter, but I've managed to move up from the very bottom to, I don't know, middle to, it just kind of depends on the match and the day, but I seem to be an inconsistent shooter. Like I'll just shoot 3 or 4 really awesome stages, 0 down, good time, and then I'll just bomb 1 or 2 stages. Like every sanctioned match, I seem to bomb at least 1 stage. And I'm like, well, there it is. I just ruined my whole match. And so what I've found about myself is usually I will, I figure out that, well, if I bomb that, there's no sense in stressing out over it. Now I'm just going to relax and have fun and shoot. And then that's when I shoot good. So sometimes I make a comeback after I bomb something, and kind of depends on which stage I bomb, if it's in the first part of the state or match or if it's in the last part of the match. But anyway, I just realized I totally went off subject on your question, but
the longest either or answer in the history of the podcast.
Yes, sorry about that.
No, that's fine. It was great. So you've been doing this now for 11 years or so, and you've been to national championships. You've shot in different divisions and changed guns. And what is it about this sport that you love so much? What is it that keeps you doing it, as opposed to, saying, well, I'm going to move on to something else, because there are other shooting disciplines that you participate in as well. What is it that keeps you coming back to IDPA?
Oh, everybody says it, but hands down, it's the people. I've never had so many old guy friends in my life. You show up and it's like, here's a whole bunch of old men, and they're just fun to hang out with. That just sounds ridiculous, but no, it's not just the old men. But no, I've met so many people over the years and all over the states. It's just crazy to think how many people I know now just from this sport. I do come back for the people, but I also enjoy the just having the skill, the muscle memory of when you pick up a gun and have to shoot it. So I got my concealed carry license back in 2008. So I decided to get my permit because I had actually been in a couple of situations that, so one night I had left the softball fields. I was playing softball at the time on like a co-ed city league. And I had called my husband, Brooks, and I said, hey, I'm on my way home. I'm going to stop and get gas. And I left the softball field, and I stopped at the Walmart to get gas. And it was exactly 1 mile from my house. And the Walmart was probably a half mile from the softball field. So I filled up. And I remember looking at the clock, and it was like 7:34 or something. Well, I got home that night, and I was watching the news, and there was a lady who was carjacked that night in the Walmart parking lot, and apparently it happened like within 4 or 5 minutes of when I was there. And
oh, wow.
Yeah. And so they kidnapped her at gunpoint. They they got her in the back seat of her car, and they stole her car. And they actually did not hurt her. She was very lucky, but they got to the next town up the road in Mayflower, and they basically opened the door, pushed her out, and stole her car. And so it was a brand new Camry at the time, and I thought, I had a new car at the time too, and it was all fixed up and lowered and had wheels on it. And I thought, man, that could have easily been me. I was by myself. It was dark, and I thought, I need to get a gun. And so, of course, that was about a year after I'd started shooting. So I was like, I've got to get my carry permit. And so when I went through that, I thought, well, I've really got to continue shooting now, because I didn't want to be one of those people that got a carry permit, stuck it in their purse or their car, and then never shot, because those people scare me, when people that have permits and never shoot their guns or don't know how to shoot their guns. That's another thing that I do like about IDPA is just the scenarios, and you can kind of picture those things happening, especially since I do go to Walmart by myself a lot, and I go places by myself a lot, and I think, with me just being short and small, I thought I'm an easy target, and so I want to be prepared. So when they're reading those scenarios, sometimes, they'll skip over the scenarios, and sometimes you laugh at them because they're kind of silly. But, and of course there's that, the people that argue say, oh, IDPA will get you killed in the streets. I've read all that stuff on the forums and all that. But, and it's true, you don't have anybody shooting back at you or anything like that. But at least you're, using some of the fundamentals and the gun handling skills, and you're getting that muscle memory that you would have to use one day if you were ever to have to draw quickly and in a bad situation. So that and the people, that's my answer. I think that's the only answer that I've given you, but out of all of those.
That works.
I tend to jump off the subject sometimes.
No problem. Angela, thank you so much for everything you're doing. I always love seeing you at the matches, and look forward to seeing you soon down the road. And thank you so much again for doing this.
No problem. Anytime. Thanks for having me.
All right, that's all the time we have for today. I want to thank our guest for coming on the show and our sponsors for making all of this possible. Take a moment, if you would, to check out the website, check out our show notes at unloadpodcast.com. We've got lots of interviews with more amazing guests like the one you heard today. Join our Facebook group at unloadpodcast.com/Facebook for all the latest updates and to connect with other fans of the show. And if you'd like to support the show, we sure would appreciate it. Consider becoming a patron at unloadpodcast.com/extra. I've got some full-length interviews and special content available there exclusively for patrons as well. And if you know somebody or you yourself would make an interesting guest for a future episode of Unload and Show Clear, please contact me at lloyd@unloadpodcast.com or click on the contact page on the website and send us a message. We'd love to hear from you. Tune in again next time for another episode of Unload and Show Clear.